Hello and welcome to the Mastermind, Body, and Spirit Show. I'm your host, Matt Belair. Today's guest is a passionate learner and devoted student of mastery. He's the author of the popular blog unlimitedmastery.com, where he writes about learning science, peak performance, creativity, and mastering skills. His writing has been featured in outlets such as TIME and Thought Catalogue. He is the author of the book, Learn, Improve, Master, How to Develop Any Skill and Excel at It. Welcome to the show, NICK VELASQUEZ.
Hey, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Great to have you here. We had a little chat before the show started, and we're definitely, similar mind and similar work. I got to browse through your book. It looks amazing. We were discussing the importance of sharing effective techniques. And it seems like it's just chock full of effective techniques on performance, on mindset, on learning. So I'm so excited to dive into this episode. And you're over in Montreal, so you're not too far away from me. But Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about how you got into this, why you wrote the book, and what brought you to where you are today?
Sure. So the book came about because I've always been obsessed with learning. I'm taking on new hobbies and new skills all the time. And I was frustrated by how difficult it was going from knowledge into skill. So one thing is knowing, let's say, a lot about painting, and a different thing is knowing how to paint. So I started researching learning science and neuroplasticity, peak performance, all these different things, trying to find the book, the book that I eventually had to write because I couldn't find exactly the principles and strategies to become a better learner. So, and halfway through the research, that's when I was trying to build a guide for myself. That was going to be the guide for the rest of my life to learn anything I wanted. But then I figured if I'm putting all this work, I might as well just turn it into a book and solve it for everyone else. But had I known the amount of work that I was getting myself into, I don't think I would have done it. I was lucky that I was so ignorant about the process, and I was so passionate about the subject, because otherwise this book would not exist.
That's amazing. Well, I definitely hear that when I started writing Zen Athlete, I was like, oh yeah, I got this. And then it's like you reach this point where it's too late now, and you're like, all right, I've gotten this far, so I'm going to have to keep going. So that's amazing. And you're saying too, before we started the show, that, you have two more books because you want to share the strategies and the things that help you learn and are effective. And so you also say that you like to spend a lot of time in Japan. And so I'm wondering if you want to speak on that a little bit before we dive into some of the tools that we can use to just, learn, apply peak performance and take it to any skill, because once you learn the process, it speeds up all other learning processes. And for me, that's an incredibly valuable thing to know.
Exactly. That's the idea, is that we become better learners. So it's a meta skill, learning how to learn. We become better learners, then we get better at everything else we try to do. The problem is that most of the time, if you want to learn how to play guitar, then you want to just learn guitar directly. No one takes the time to learn how to learn first. It's like the analogy would be you wanting to read a novel before ever knowing how to read. So we have this amazing skill as a species, this amazing power, which is learning. Everything we've created, everything we've done is because of our ability to learn. And we can hone that skill. It's like anything else. So if we take the one step back and then we learn how to learn, then we're going to learn everything else much faster. So whether it's a sport, art, music, anything we want. And that's why it's so important to take on that skill first, that meta skill. About Japan, I just love that place so much. So I try to be there 4 months out of the year. And I think it's just the people. Everyone is aware of everyone else, so they don't want to bother you. And so one story that would sum up Japan for me is that no one honks on the street. The thing is, let's say someone cuts you off. Yeah, you get mad. But then if you honk, now you're bothering everyone else. And that's why they don't do it. It's to respect everyone else's silence and just peace of mind. And just living that way, it's so much easier. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
And you were saying too, that like, they're very considerate of everybody. Like everybody's got everyone
Yes,
else's best interest at heart.
exactly. You go on the metro and it could be completely packed at rush hour and everyone's quiet because they know they're trying to keep silence so everyone else can rest. It's amazing. The other thing that I got the most out of the Japanese is their attention to detail and attention to quality. So when I'm there, I wake up around 4 a.m. and go to the gym, and I'm walking the streets of Tokyo on that time, and I see a guy. His shop won't be open for a few hours, and he's cleaning the street. That's not even his job, and he's washing the street. And I saw him vacuuming the sidewalk in front of his shop, because that's how much he cares about everything of his shop has to be on point. Like even the sidewalk in front of it, like that's another level. And that's how they do everything. They just have so much attention to detail and to quality.
That's incredible. That's so amazing. I remember seeing this video once of a foreigner was traveling in Japan, and they basically were saying that when somebody lets you pass them, then they flash the lights just to say like a thank you, like they put it on the four-way. It's just like, thanks for letting me by. It's like, it's such a considerate place to be. And so
Yes.
I feel like in the world we're living in the West right now, it's so divided, and it's good to just remember the golden rule. You know, I think a lot of
Hmm.
people are getting really upset and really angry with each other, and you can have differing opinions. And if you feel strongly, you're going to be heated, but just remember the golden rule. You know what I mean? State your
Yes.
opinion. But we got a lot of ad hominem. We got a lot of attacks. We got a lot of people just basically being buttholes. You know what I mean? And
Hmm.
so if we can still have our opinion, but be kinder to each other, I think that would be a much better experience for everybody. And it seems like Japan is a great embodiment of that. And I know that they have one of the blue zones there as well. Do you know what a blue zone is?
Yes.
Yeah.
In Okinawa,
Yeah.
northern part of one of the islands in Okinawa has like the longest lifespan in the entire world.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So for people who don't know, Blue Zone is the longest lifespan and I guess best quality of life that they have. And so they look at the different spots in the world where that exists, and Okinawa is one. So definitely on my travel list. But let's
Yeah.
get into this, because man, your book is deep. It's just full of techniques. And so let's go through a little bit. You have you broke it out into three parts: learn, master. What's the middle one?
Learn,
Excel.
improve, master.
Learn, improve, master. So can you talk us through a bit of fundamentals? What's the best way to tackle this um, throughout the podcast? Do it in a linear way like that and share some of the techniques?
Sure, we can do it that way. That would work.
Okay.
So the beginning part is about how we learn, and there's the different processes that are involved in learning anything. So in the first part is divided in a couple of steps. The first step would be understanding. And then understanding is just making sense of information. And it's different from memorizing. So sometimes we assume that because we understand something that now it's internalized. And it's not how it works. So maybe you read a book or you attended a seminar and you understand everything that was taught. But then a week later you have trouble telling someone else the most important lessons from either the book or the seminar. And and that's fine, because the first step in the process is just understanding, making sense of information. The mistake we make is that we assume that now is memorized. Memorizing is a completely different process. We need to internalize that information, right? Then after memory comes practice. And practice has like different points that we need to pay attention to. So is practice not the same as repetition? Some people think that because, let's use the example of music, and imagine that you know how to play guitar, and every time you're going to practice, quote unquote, you sit down and you play the same songs that you already know. That's not practice, that's repetition. It's not the same. Your skills are not improving. So for practice to be effective, they need to follow certain rules, such as you need to be focused on what you're doing. You need to be pushing your skills. So let's say if you're working on a piece of music, increasing the tempo. So now it's forcing you to stretch beyond your comfort zone. It's forcing you to be faster, and you're going to make mistakes along the way. But that's a good sign that says you're trying harder, and that's what's going to improve your skill. So that's a following step. The next one, it's simulation, it's bridging. So that's when we take something we've been practicing from the context of practice to the context of performance. And the easiest example will be martial arts, which I know you're a martial artist, so you'll get this part pretty easily. Is you practice some kicks or you practice some punches, let's say on a heavy bag, but then going from that, from practicing with a heavy bag to a fight, that's too big of a jump. You need in between. So the in between would be sparring with other martial artists, or working with a coach who's pretending to punch back or hit back, and now you have to evade and all these things. But you're not in the high stakes situation of an actual fight. Then once you bridge and you put those skills that you developed during practice into a simulated performance, after that point, then you move into performance. Now you're ready to fight. And in the performance, you're not practicing, you're not trying to learn, you're just executing what you know. So those are the steps involved into learning anything. You understand, memorize, practice, you bridge, and then you perform. And that takes care of the learning section. Then for each part, you have principles and you have strategies, which is where I discuss in depth into the book.
That's
Now
an
let's move into, sure,
Yeah,
go
that's
ahead.
amazing summary. Well, I'll just chime in real quick just on the one part that's so important. The simulation part and bridging the gap, because there's no substitute for like the real life scenario. So,
Mm,
and there's a process for learning. Snowboarding has evolved in such an insane way from when I started. When I started snowboarding, a switch 720, it was amazing. That was basically doing a 720 your opposite way, your unnatural way. That was the pinnacle. But
mm,
now, through the evolution of training and simulation, and also progression and evolution, people are doing, triple backflip 1620s or whatever, and it's just completely bonkers. But whenever I was training a high performance athlete, like somebody in Nitro Circus, or something that was high stakes, it was so important to simulate, because their life was on the line. They could break both their legs, they could break their back. And so training on a trampoline, foam pits, that's one
foam
example that you
pits.
see
Yeah,
it out in the world. And so people forget that you can simulate certain things in different scenarios. Like even for speaking, you could practice your speech to a tree out in the forest.
exactly.
If you were a painter, the sad thing about creatives, and I feel like every creative should read the book, The War of Art, and
Uh-huh.
probably your book and my book, because if you put Zen um, art in the end of mine, it's like this process of basically going through the motions and making sure you do it, and not stopping at it's got to be perfect first. Because if you were painting and you applied these techniques that you share in your book, and I'm sure that some of them bridge, it's really engaging in that process. And the more you do it, obviously, the better you're going to get. So why don't we move on to the second part? You can add on to that if you want, but I think that your summary was incredibly brilliant, and the distinctions are so important. And that sometimes people get hung up with that, because they might say, oh, I've memorized it, why don't I understand? And they get into
Mm,
this negative loop in their mind where they're not sure why they're not performing. So then they want to give up, because it's now become hard. It's become
yes,
something dangerous, and people have a very poor frame of how to deal with failure. And failure is not a bad thing. Failure is great. It means you tried. It's just a learning
exactly.
experience. So yeah,
And
so
it's part of the process.
yeah.
It's inevitable to make mistakes and to fail along the way. And you bring up a great point, which is the myths and misconceptions about learning. A lot of people don't take new skills, or they quit them quickly after starting, because they have this unrealistic expectations of how quickly they should learn something. And part of it is, as adults, we already master or are pretty good at certain things. It might be your job, it might be a skill that you've been practicing for a long time. So we forget what it is to be a beginner again. And then when we try something new and we suck, we're like, I'm not, I'm not good for this. Like, I don't have what it takes. And that's a false belief. It's just, you forgot what it feels like to be a beginner. You forgot what it feels like not to know how to walk, So, and then we have this expectation that we should get it so quickly. And if we don't, then we think it's our fault somehow. Like, we don't have the talent. And in reality, talent doesn't play that big of a role in developing and mastering skills. It gives an edge, and that's important. Yes, if you want to be the best at something, you do need some genetics part on your side. If you want to be the best swimmer in the world, then you do need some genetics on your part. But anyone can be among the best, or even just your best, which is just as worthy and just as noble of a goal. So a lot of people just put on talent as a way to hide behind it, saying, I don't have it, so I'm not even going to try. Like, that's not what it is. Talent just gives an edge. It's not the bulk of learning and mastering skills. So there are a few myths and misconceptions about how we learn. The other ones about making mistakes. We assume that because we're making mistakes, then everything's wrong and we're not good for it. And no, making mistakes is just a natural part of the process. Everyone makes tons of mistakes. We forget that even Mozart, Shakespeare, they all had to make mistakes learning their craft. Mozart was not born playing perfect piano. That did not happen. So even the so-called prodigies of history, all of them had to develop the skill. No one skips the process. No one, ever. We all have to go through mistakes. We have to go through the struggle. It's just part of what it is. And I see this often learning languages. The people that are willing to make mistakes and fail are the ones that learn the language the fastest. I'm usually on the other side. I'm too shy to make mistakes, to go outside and talk to the native speakers, and so it takes me longer. And that's what it is. We're sometimes perfect preparers. We don't want to jump in the pool before we know how to swim, and you can't do it that way. You need to jump to learn how to swim. So there are these different myths and misconceptions that I also discussed there. And the biggest hope, the whole premise of the book is that most of the time we're seeing the end result of things. We're seeing the performance, the glamour. So imagine you see a magic illusion. See a magician vanishes a card, makes it reappear somewhere else, and we are amazed by it. We think we could never do that. But if we could peek behind the illusion, we would see that there is a process that we could follow too. We could also learn sleight of hand and do the same effect. So most of the time it happens the same. We read the novel of an author that we really like, and we think we can never do something like that. We see a quarterback playing a game, we could never do that. We think all these things because we're seeing the refined product, the end result, and not the process behind it. So my goal was, let me show you what happens behind the scenes. Let me show you what the process is. So at that point, all these dreams that maybe have been frustrated in your life, maybe you wanted to learn to play guitar and you thought you didn't have what it took, is to show you, yes, you can. Here's how. That's the entire premise.
That's amazing, man. And I totally agree. It reminds me of Growth Mindset by Carol Dweck, which I'm sure
Yes.
you've come across. And you know, that whole book is just on one principle of what you're speaking about here. And I
Mhm.
remember reading that book, and this was recently, and I was just like, yeah, I've heard this before. But she goes through um, all of the important details of the difference between growth mindset and fixed mindset. And so the body of work is amazing and transformational. You know, I kind of knew that intuitively, where through martial arts, they teach you it's mind, body, spirit, but a lot of it is getting your butt kicked and doing things that are really, really hard. You know what I mean? And so I'm like, oh,
Yes.
okay, this is just normal. Same with skateboarding, actually. He's a great teacher. Jordan Peterson has a book, and I forget what the title is, but 12 rules for life. And one
12
of them
rules
is,
for life. Yeah.
yeah, don't bother kids while they're skateboarding. Skateboarding is only failure. You know what I mean? It's funny now because I'm an older adult and I skateboard and there's a bunch of kids and some scooter kids going around, and I'll just fall right on my ass like so hard. And, you know, I'm kind of big and a bit muscular. So you have this big, sweaty old man, bearded fellow cruising around the skate park, just eating it, right? And getting up. But, you know, and you'll hear comments here and there where people are like, oh, you fell, like, oh my goodness, like this is a big deal. But if you skate, you realize that that's 90% of it. And understanding the process, right? They say they'll take hard work over talent any single day.
Mhm.
Talent, if anything, might be a curse a lot of the time because we expect it to be easy again. And it's those who can overcome adversity over and over and over and over and over again are the ones that really excel. And it's such a great point to say, hey, we're watching the finished product. And if you look at UFC, if you look at martial artists, if you look at any entrepreneur and you study them, Gary Vee, I like because he just, you know, he's super realistic. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? He doesn't shine it up with a, you know, it's easy and we're just going to 10X through, you know, no work. It's like, no, you're going to have to work your butt off and do
Yeah.
these other things. It's going to help. And so it makes it real. So do you want to keep going with the next part? Because even with what you're sharing here, when you get the book, and I invite you guys, you can even go to Amazon to kind of check out the chapters. It's, you know, ridiculous. Part of the way I interview sometimes, if someone's written a book, I'll go through the chapters and look at what is most exciting to me. And yours are just,
Mhm.
every single one is a practical
Thank you.
tool. And so I'm going to let you speak on which ones you feel are most important.
Oh, we can keep chatting also about
Yeah. Yeah.
the talent and hard work. I have two stories for you. Well, one is about Usain Bolt. So we usually see Usain Bolt just smiling and posing for the cameras after the Olympics or after a race and stuff. And during the research, I was looking into these documentaries and these videos, and I saw one where he's running and then he stops and starts throwing up, and then he keeps running like it's nothing. And then they're interviewing him, and he's like, well, that's what it takes. It's just, then he said, after losing to Blake, I think it was before the Rio Olympics, he said, the amount of work that I put in, I was throwing up every day for a month. And that's the thing. That's the part that we don't often see. And then I always thought that they added that as maybe a way to make him seem larger than life. But no, he's just that way. And most people say he's a genetic freak. No, he's mostly just freak. And you're trying to deny that that happens to feel better about your own efforts. But then you realize, man, I don't push myself hard enough. Like, that's really pushing it. And we would imagine him showing up to practice smiling and skipping and all good, and it's not that way. He was saying some days you wake up and you know you're going to train and it's going to be hard and you don't want to do it, and you really don't want to do it, but you have to, and people don't understand how hard that is. So I think it's very important that we always try to look behind that glamour of the performance and see what it really takes, and then we get to decide if it's really what we want to do or not. The other story that I wanted to share with you is I went learning motorcycle racing. So it's an exciting sport, dangerous sometimes. And towards the end of the first day, it was a weekend of just teaching and then racing. The last turn of the last lap, because of course that's when things happen, right? It's just the last turn.
Because of course.
Yeah. And I took it too fast, and I just came out of the truck. I fell hard. My head first the helmet.
Oh
my shoulder, everything. I was rolling. And then I just stood still. I didn't know how bad I had fallen. And I'm trying not to move to not make things worse. The marshal comes in and is like, hey, call the ambulance. This guy's not moving. He comes to me. He's like, hey, are you okay? Like, that's fine. Just give me a second. I need to catch my breath. I don't know what happened. So finally, nothing really happened. Like, I was able to walk away without harm. Not for the bike. The ton of the bike that got destroyed. And then the next day, so right after that truck, I got scared about riding motorcycles again, like immediately. And I was afraid of going on a bike. And the moment I got home, it's like, I need to go on a bike and at least go around the corner, because otherwise this fear is going to consume me, and I won't be able to ride again. And I made such a big deal out of that fall, kept playing it over and over in my head. I was dreaming about it, but I still had another day. And I didn't know if I should do it. And everyone told me, like, don't do it. That's ridiculous. You're being insane. You already fell. Like, you cheated death. Why would you do this again? I'm like, I don't want to end like this. I want to go back. So I went back, and I was really scared. And then I talked to my teacher, and I said, like, I fell yesterday. And I'm like waiting for his sympathy. And like, great. That's awesome that you fell. Like, what are you talking about? Like, yeah, you got it out of the way. Now you know what it feels like. It's all good. There are two types of riders: those who have fallen and those who are about to fall. So the thing, it turns out, is that it's common in the sport to fall. It does happen. I thought it was very rare, and that's why I made a big deal out of it. I took that mistake, that failure, as definitive, as me just being the worst rider ever. And in reality, other 14 people had fallen that same day. I just didn't see it because I was too focused on my own thing. So it does happen. And that's the thing. If we take whatever mistake, whatever failure we experience, and we add the wrong narrative, then it can make us quit. And I was ready to quit. And I'm so glad that I went back, and then I realized, oh, it's not a big deal. And then people fail on that day too. It's like, well, that's what the sport is. You fall sometimes. So it's important to have the right expectation, and then talk to people and know what you're getting yourself into, and understand that mistakes happen and failures will happen. It's part of the process.
That's a really great story. One of the things that I learned quickly in snowboarding when I was teaching people about the mental game was you fall, and sometimes you fall really hard. And there are many skateboarders, snowboarders, extreme sports athletes that have a fall and never do it again. Now, it could be for good reason, and there's no problem with that, because maybe it hurt or they got injured, and that's fine. Sometimes it's something small. And what happens is, when the fall happens or the accident happens, they replay it over and over in their mind. So, I remember us doing a backflip at Canada Olympic Park, and for whatever reason, one of the guys that was grooming the jumps yells as I'm about to do the backflip, go upside down. So I think somebody is at the bottom of the jump. So I immediately just fan out and like to a squirrel. And so I'm just, if you can imagine the worst case scenario of doing a backflip, going upside down and staying there, that's what I was at. And I couldn't do anything. I was upside down and just like, oh my God. And so I fell on my head, but luckily it was a softer day and I was fine. But it freaked me out. But I immediately went and I did the exact same trick again. After I like yelled at the guy being like, what in the hell? There was no one there. Who were you talking to? Why would you do that? And
Yeah.
so as I went up the chairlift, what I did was I visualized me doing the trick perfectly. And so I didn't start reimagining and like, you know, you've looked at neural connections and how we make
Yes.
connections in the brain. Well, when it becomes emotional and you're afraid, that's a really great way to fire and connect neurons is through emotion, and fear will bind them together. It's one of the craziest ones. And so you need to replay that and say, what is it that I wanted to do? How can I do that? Reassess it. But you don't identify with the failure and you make it a part of you. Like people will make that failure a part of them. They'll
Mhm.
integrate it in it. And what people at high levels of mastery do is they overcome the challenge. And you see this in fighting as well, in martial arts, similar to your example of falling. And that's why extreme sports athletes are for me, the pinnacle of mental toughness because of their level of danger. It's all
Mhm.
on the line. It's this real fine needle.
Yes.
You go back in the day, it would be samurais, right? Like what's more dangerous, a samurai or a boxer? Well, boxing's kind of dangerous, but getting cut open by a sword is
Mhm.
much more. So their level of attention to detail and their mastery would be much higher than you know, that level. And so when you go down to like your everyday Joe where they don't have a lot of consequence, right, there's not a lot of reason, like same with a basketball shot, you can say, hey, visualization will help you improve the probability of making this shot. They may or may believe you, but they might not practice it because when they miss the shot, they're not going to break both their legs at the same
Mhm.
time or get cut open
Yes.
by a sword, right? So these techniques and skills are essential, and they work, and they're really critical to use and to understand and to overcome the adversity. So in martial arts, when you get good, you learn that you're going to get hit. You know, you have this imagination before you do martial arts that you're not going to get hit, that you're the ninja on
Mhm.
every single movie you've ever seen. You're going to dodge it like the Matrix, right? But you'll see the best fighters in the UFC, they'll take a punch right in the face, but they'll be staring right at the person. So
Mhm.
then they're going to be hitting them with another one because they have a different perspective of what it is. And like you said, a different understanding. And it's
Yes.
so important to be able to frame your mistakes, to frame the adversities, to frame the failures in a very empowering way. And what's happening is people are identifying with that failure and integrating it. And then that idea will move into all other areas of life, everything else, not just that
Yes.
snowboard fall, not just the failure on the bike. The next time you want to write a book or you're thinking about doing a seminar, you want to try this small business. Oh, I failed in small business before. So what? You know what I mean? I think it
Mhm.
was like Colonel Sanders got like 1,100 no's before like KFC or something like that. It's one of the famous
Yeah.
stories, you know, or the Rocky story, you know, Sylvester Stallone, he's like, was an actor and he went to everybody with scripts like 2 or 3 times, you know, then he sold his dog for Pete's sakes. And then he was at the lowest point in his life. Have you heard the story?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, he's at the
What's that?
lowest point of his life. His girl leaves him. You know, he has no
Wow.
money for rent, and so he's at the lowest part of his life after he sold his dog that day. And then he comes home and watches a boxing fight and writes Rocky. And then so he writes the script and he says, I have to act in it. And they're offering him like 5 grand for just a script, but he can't act. He says no. And they go, okay, 10 grand, 20 grand. He just keeps saying no, 200 grand or something. He's like, I have to act in it. So they're like, okay, we're going to give you like 5 grand and, you know, we'll give you a part of the royalties. And he
Mm.
does Rocky and just absolutely smashes it. And so, you
Wow.
know, that story is not unique, right?
Yep.
Success is inevitable if you don't give up, and it builds your character the whole way. And so that's a rant. Do you want to add on to any
No,
of that?
exactly. I agree with that. And some of the strategies for getting over mistakes is part is separating the performance from the performer. So understanding that if you made a mistake, that's just a mistake. It's not it's not necessarily something wrong with you. So people start assuming it as their identity. They say, I'm a failure instead of I failed. And the idea is, well, it's not that you're not good enough, it's that you're not good enough yet, but you can get there. And that's the point. You focus on getting better each time. The other one is just letting go of mistakes. Because few times the one mistake we made, let's say in a fight, staying with martial arts, it's rarely the one single punch that they land, that like the opponent landed, that is gonna take you down. Is that you start thinking about it. You start judging what you've done so far or what's going to happen next. So it takes you away from the present moment. But usually, just the first mistake is not the worst one. It's when you let it snowball. It's the second, third, and fourth. That's what kills you. That's the one that destroys you. When you start like second guessing yourself, like now I'm gonna get hit again, and now you're scared. And like you said, the good ones are still looking. They're like, okay, I got the punch, but it doesn't matter. Like I'm still here. I keep doing. Like stick to the plan, stick to the training. That's something else. Sometimes when we make a mistake, we throw all our training out of the window. Like, no, you're supposed to stick with your training. That's why you spend so much time training. If you're not gonna trust it when it matters most, then why go through it at all? And that's what they do in armed forces. Like they teach you the training, like this is what you're supposed to do, and stick with it because it will give you the best chances of success, and in their case, survival. And it's tough. It's tough to stick to our plan and to stick to our training, but that's what we're supposed to do. That's why we practice.
Yep, absolutely. It's the process. I was gonna think of something, but I kind of forget it now. I want to. Have we touched on anything around like principles for learning? We've gone in there a little bit, but again, when I scroll the chapters, and I definitely invite you guys to check out, even if you go on Amazon to kind of look at all the chapters. You've got like the principles, which are like 6 things:
Mm.
understand, memorize, memory versus association. There's just so much in here. So when we're going through the process of learning, what are some of the important things to remember? So we've made the decision that we want to learn guitar, we want to learn small business, and this is just a side note, but I love like giving this idea to people. I find it very sad how many people don't consider how powerful and amazing that they are, like their capabilities as a human being. And I'll just give an example. Like if you're listening to this podcast and you imagine like your mother or your son or someone you love, and they said, okay, your son or mom or daughter is going to die, let's say this little gremlin devil thing came out and said they're going to die in a year if you don't figure out what your life passion is and how to make let's say $6,000 a month on what your life passion is. You have 1 year to figure that out. With that level of dedication, of will, of like directed energy of what you're capable of, you would figure out whatever it was. If you're like, you have to master the guitar, like Leonard Skinner, or I don't know who the best
Yeah.
guitar, or, Jimi Hendrix, in a year, your will would go into it and you would figure it out with that level of will. And we're not engaging with that power. Right. And that's what you're kind of saying too with the process. And that's what all the great minds have said. It's not the first book that was the mastery. It's not the second book or painting. It's not the third song or painting. Even like Kanye West comes to mind, where he sings like one song. He says, I was making beats for 3 summers, all day, every day. And that's just 3 summers, but he's not going to give up. So where are you after 10 years of dedication? And when I was training with the Shaolin monks, that's what I realized when I interviewed Master Go, who could break stone with 2 fingers. He could break bigger pieces over his head. And I was like, how is that possible? And he basically said years of training, years of conditioning the fingers, and
Yeah.
also learning about chi and the inner systems of the body and meditation and directing energy. And I was just thinking, if I applied a fraction of that toward a worthy goal, it would happen. And so wouldn't it be great to apply, a good amount of that dedication? But I think it starts with the idea of what is meaningful to you, that you would actually put that level of will, right? Because the example says, oh, wow, you're going to kill someone. So now this will comes out, but that's available to us. That energy is available to us. And so we got to figure out what that is to then apply all of these principles that you're talking about to experience it. And anybody who's done it will say the same thing, that you're capable of it. These are the processes and tools, and you 100% have the ability to do the same thing.
For sure. One of the things is that no skill can resist the relentless attack of deliberate practice. You can learn
Say that
whatever it is that
again.
you
Say
want.
say that again. That was so great. And with that accent, you got to say that again. That was brilliant.
That no skill can resist the relentless attack of deliberate practice. And
Ah, I
all
love
skills are
that.
learnable. So all this that we have in the world, we made it up. There was no football in nature. There was no hockey. There was none of these things. We made them up. They're skills that we created. And in the same way, we can learn them. It's just a matter of applying ourselves to it. Sometimes we underestimate how much we can do over the long term. So a big chunk of it is just doing the work every day. You put in the work, and that's what masters do. Mastery in itself, and we're skipping ahead of one of the sections, but there's nothing fundamentally different if you're pursuing mastery versus learning something. I mean, the practice is the same, the study is the same. It's mostly about mindset. Is, are you doing the work every day? Are you committed the long term? And are you willing to give everything you have? And that's really the difference. And in reality, if we break it down, it doesn't take that much. It's a couple of hours a day of focused training. It's doing it every day for years. That's the tough part. But if we chunk it down to say, and this is a strategy that recovering alcoholics and addicts use, it's just called winning the day. And with the respect and admiration that they deserve, we're going to borrow it for ourselves in trying to master something, which is if they think about how many days they've been drinking and then suddenly trying to stop, that's it's too much, it's too heavy. And if they think of trying to stay sober for the rest of their lives, it's overwhelming. So what they try to do and what they teach them is like, just think about in terms of, I won't drink today. That's it. Yesterday, I don't mind what happened. Maybe you fell off the wagon yesterday, but don't matter. Just today. So it doesn't matter the past. Don't think about the future. Think of today. And we do the same in trying to master something. Is, hey, I'm gonna practice today really hard. I don't care how long I've been doing it. I don't care how much more I'm gonna have to do it to get really good. Just today. And I try to apply that in exercise. And I train every day, and there's not a day that I don't think I don't want to do this. Okay, it's been years, and to this day, I never wake up thinking this is so awesome. I want to go train. No, never.
Yep.
It becomes a habit. It becomes a routine. It gets easier, but it's never that I think it's a pleasure that I'm going to do it. Once I start doing it, it's different. It's like jumping in a cold pool. You don't want to jump, but once you're in there, okay, it's fun. It's okay, but you don't want to jump first time. So, and what I try to do is just that: is don't think about how many days straight you've been training. Don't think about how many more you have to train to reach your goals. Just today, train today, put all your energy today, and then tomorrow we'll see. I'm allowed to quit tomorrow if I want to, but not today. And you just renew that vow every day. That's how you get better at anything. It just takes one day.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, and I love the mindset around that, and there's power and consistency. And does your book talk anything about motivation? I feel people, are really, what they'll say is like, I don't have the motivation or inspiration. And you touched on something that's really important there is a lot of people think that, oh, the people that are successful in business, the people that are great at martial arts, the people that are great at music or have quote unquote made it. Like my buddy Adam Roa, we were homies for a while. We went to Egypt together and he did spoken word poetry, and he was amazing at his craft. And then he blew up on YouTube, and I was like, I don't know, 20 something stupid, like 100 million views on Goalcast or something ridiculous.
Oh,
But we had chatted after, and it's just process. He's still in the process. He's always evolving that process. He couldn't just have that one thing and that it ends. That was a result of him continuing the process, and now he is still continuing the process. And where he'll be in 5 years or 10 years or whatever, some things I like to say is like, or sometimes I like to say, like, the result isn't up to you, right? Stick with the process. Let the result, give your best, right? Stick with
yes.
the process, give your best, and you'll get better. And you made another great point earlier on. I like to give the example to my clients that, like, when you're a kid and you first have like your training wheels, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're not on a huge, let's say you want to do downhill biking. You're not doing a huge downhill bike yet. You start with the training wheels. Then you get the training wheels off. And then once you get better, you see more options with your skill, but it needs to be developed. So as an adult, you have to have that humbleness of just being a beginner and then giving yourself 10 years. And so when you think of it in that frame, it changes the game. And I remember there's a quote that says, most people overestimate what they can do in 1 year and underestimate what they can do in 10 or 5 or
Yep.
something like that. And,
No.
and I believe that's 100% true.
Yeah, 100% true. We tend to think that um, we would never be able to do something, and then you're putting the work every day, and suddenly you find, oh, I did this. Like writing a book, it takes so long, and then you're just doing it one day at a time, and finally you get to that finish line. It's like, well, I can't believe it. But if you're thinking about the entire thing, it's overwhelming. Because, for example, in bodybuilding or in writing a book, you can't do it in 1 week, you can't do it in 1 day, you can't even do it in a month. um, so it takes that humbleness of committing to submitting to the process, embracing the process, and saying, I'm going to keep doing it every day until I see those results. And sometimes that's frustrating because you want to see it quickly, but you don't see your muscles grow from one day to the next. So you got to trust that process and then keep working it, and then eventually you know that you're going to get where you want to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And so can you speak on some of the principles that you outlined for processes for improving?
Sure. So on the improving side, the most important part for improving is feedback. We need to know what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong. Um, and many times it sounds obvious, but many people don't like to see how they perform. So let's say for an actor that doesn't want to see their own recordings, um, it's like that doesn't make any sense. You need to see it to know what you're doing. Same for a martial artist not wanting to see their own fights. Like, you need to see them. You need to know what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong so you can correct it. So there are different ways of getting feedback, and then we apply it into our methods and into how we execute them. So feedback is the way we get better at anything. The other component of feedback is overcoming challenges. And this ties back into overcoming failure, mistakes, impatience. Impatience is a big one because we want things to go really fast. And sometimes we start jumping from method to method, trying to find the perfect one, the ones that is really easy or really fast. And usually there's not a perfect method. And we could use fitness again as an example. People always want the easiest, fastest way to get in shape. They're trying to find a perfect method. First of all, the perfect method doesn't exist. Second, let's imagine for a second that it does exist. Okay? Even if you find the perfect method, you will still have to diet and exercise in some shape or form. You cannot escape the foundation of fitness. And it's the same for learning skills. Like, we can find methods that are more efficient, but you will still have to practice and you'll still have to put in the effort. It is a struggle. There's no escaping it. That's the process. So when you ask me about if I talk about motivation, I think in the examples and just the mindset of getting to mastery and how we learn and just seeing the process in a more realistic way, I think that's very motivating. I prefer the person that's going to tell me, look, this is going to be really hard, but let me show you how, instead of the one that tells me this is super easy. And then you don't get it and you think there's something wrong with you. And a lot of like language apps, this happens with them. It's like, learn a language in a month. No, you won't. No, you won't. That's just not how it works. But then you think is your problem. Then you think you don't have it. Like, no, they were trying to sell you something. But if they told you, look, it's a process is difficult, but there's a way to do it, and you can learn it in within eight months to a year or 6 months if you really apply yourself, you're like, okay, I understand what I'm facing, and it's all good. And then it's taking you longer. You understand this is part of the process. I shouldn't be anxious about it. So part of it is we have this misconceptions of how quickly the learning should go. So I think I talk about motivation very indirectly, as in this is the process, and now you when you understand it, you're more accepting of the process itself, and you're also more forgiving of your own shortcomings and mistakes because you know that that's what it takes. You know that that's how it goes. So it's motivating in that sense, and also talking about the different people and how they master skills and the effort they had to put in. So when we talked about Usain Bolt, that to me is inspiring. It's like, oh, that to me says, hey, if I really wanted to run and I put a lot of effort, I could get so much better, instead of thinking that he's just a freak of nature that never works really hard at it and he just runs pretty quickly. Like, no, you see him train, is like, wow, okay, he's human. And that's the thing. For me, it's more motivating to see that there is a human instead of trying to think of them as superheroes and then pretending you should have it. No, that's not what it is. Mastery requires, here's how I like to think about it. Mastery, the gods of mastery demand human sacrifice. And it can't come from anyone else but you. But if you're lucky enough to find your calling, find something that you're very passionate about, then it's a sacrifice you willingly make. And in that sense, that to me is the biggest motivation.
That's amazing. Can you say that again? That was another good one. The
That
gods of mastery
the gods of
demand human
mastery demand
sacrifice.
human
But what's the second
sacrifice.
part?
And it cannot come from anyone else but you. But if you find something that you really enjoy, if you find a calling or passion in life, it is a sacrifice you willingly make.
You memorize that? Because that's brilliant, man. I'm going to make that a quote. I'm going to get somebody to put some music to it. It's so true. And it's funny because like at the beginning of the show, I remember I was kind of like joking. I was like, holy smokes, man, you've got like the photos online and he's got like the business suit and the one looking all studly. And then just the absolutely ripped abs. Like, oh my God, you know what I mean? Like jeepers creepers. But you know, fitness is it's one of those markers, you know what it takes. Nobody gets a free pass, you know, and that's why, like, even in the spiritual game, quote unquote, I don't even know what that means, but let's say I go to festivals and I go to Burning Man and people are, um, quote unquote, spiritual. I don't know how to, I'm trying to frame this nicely,
Yes.
because you see a lot of people will say certain things, but they haven't like paid the dues yet. Right. Like they have good intentions and they have, you know, they want to make a difference, but you know who's paid the dues. You know what I mean? Nobody gets by without paying the dues. Same within snowboarding. They literally, that's the expression. When you eat it so hard on a handrail, and Quebec
Mm.
actually produces some of the best snowboard, they call them jibbers, the people who ride rails, and it's unbelievable. My friend is Cale Hill is one of the best rail riders on the planet, and thankfully he's a like Zen athlete team member. He's an absolute boss. But when you eat it super hard going down an icy handrail in Quebec trying some sort of crazy move on your snowboarding, they call it paying the dues, and they laugh because they're just like,
That makes perfect
eventually,
sense.
yeah, you
Yeah.
got to pay the dues. You know, the gods demand sacrifice. But you know, when you pay the dues, like nothing worthwhile is easy. When you go to the gym and you persevere, you grow as a human. When I train with the Shaolin monks, the biggest thing that I took away was how much more I'm capable of, because they are the most vicious, ruthless, and unforgiving trainers you will ever meet in your life. They are they are intense. The one day we do on Fridays we would do mountain run, where we basically run up this mountain. There's steps and then it would go into gravel, and you just basically run up and down as many times as you could. And so some people would do the bear crawl down, and it was quite the distance. So I'm running, and my idea is that I'm going to bear crawl the first section, which is maybe like a 12th of the entire thing, maybe. And I figure that that's a pretty good distance. That's a challenge. So I get to the top, I start bear crawling down, and I've got like, it's stones and it's uncomfortable on the hands, you know, like all that. And all of a sudden, this monk that's walking up, he turns around and he starts walking beside me going down the hill. And so I have to keep going. And so I'm like halfway to my mental mark of where I want to be. I get to that mental mark and he just keeps walking with me, and I'm giving out. And then he just starts, he sees it coming because I'm weak and I'm all jello armed and I can't do anymore. So he grabs a stick and he breaks it off in the side, and he's waiting to hit me with this stick for when my jello arms go out. So lo and behold, I'm now like twice what I thought that I could do, because I know he demands sacrifice. And so
Yeah.
I get to that and I collapse, and he just starts hitting me. I end up going to the bottom, something that I never even conceived was possible, because there was someone, you know, and I think that there's, yeah, I think even in your book, there's a chapter on mentors,
Mm.
somebody to believe in you, to help you get out your gift, your capabilities, your, like what you have. We all have that capability. We're all made of so much more, but we're being sold out in this world that we're less. Like with the coronavirus thing, there's many things that bother me about it. But the main thing is how many people discount their immune system. And because my study has been on what is possible with self-healing, what's possible with the immune system, what's possible with what we're capable of and how strong we can be. But we've gone into this very comfortable society. And if everybody is very comfortable, it's like the movie Wall-E, where everybody's overweight and they don't even have to stand up for themselves. That's a little bit of the world we're living in. And so I imagine, like back in the day, we're hunting and gathering, and we have strong backs, and we're strong because of all this stuff we have to do. But now, because of these creature comforts, packaged food, we don't have to really work for everything. We're always sitting down. We got the most comfortable chairs. It's actually a curse. And we get lulled into this comfort. And what will happen is you get older and older, and you have this moment of terror that you think, oh shit, I didn't even come close to what I was capable of. I let the comfort, the ease distract me and lure me into this comfortable feeling and hold me there when I know now what I'm capable of, what I could have understood. And I think that it's something we need to consider. There's a podcast I did with Frank Ostaseski a long time ago. He wrote the 5 agreements, what death can teach us about fully living, and the regrets people have on their deathbed. And nobody regrets going full out. Nobody regrets, pursuing their passions relentlessly, right? But so many regret not trying because of the fear of failure. And I think that's sad, because we all have the same capability. We all have it. And it's just applying these processes and tuning into new mindsets. And the sad thing is, you would know this too, that the way that our culture exists, the way that our school systems exist and what's out there, it's not teaching us this culture of embracing challenge, overcoming adversity, dealing with all these things so we can become great, because it's necessary. You got to fall on your bike. You want to do martial arts, you're getting punched in the face. Day one of the Shaolin training, I'm getting kicked in the back by a Shaolin monk super hard, and I've never even felt my inner lungs rumble. Like, I thought he's breaking my insides. I was like, what did I sign up for? And so, we're capable of more. So I'll stop talking and see what you think of all that.
No, absolutely. And I think we're just being very averse to what's being labeled as the negative emotions. So trying to stay away from pain, from struggle, from discomfort, and all learning, all improvement, it comes from discomfort. So let's say with fitness, you need to put your body through discomfort. You need to put it through stress. The same if you want to learn anything else, like learning takes effort. And that's one of the things, and I talk about it in the book, where I lately there's been a lot of articles and they talk about learning should be fun. No, learning is not required to be fun. It can be fun, but it doesn't have to be so. It
He
comes
doesn't
with
know.
pain and boredom and frustration, and that's the process. But then we assume because we don't feel comfortable that we just shouldn't do it, because we've been conditioned to just avoid anything that makes us feel uncomfortable, and that becomes a problem later in life. But imagine if we had that toxic attitude when we were growing up. We wouldn't know how to speak, we wouldn't know how to walk, we wouldn't know how to ride a bicycle, we wouldn't know anything, because it took so much effort and so much failing. And that's the other point, and connecting back to the failures, that we take them so personally instead of just thinking, yeah, paying your dues. And if everyone just acted like, hey, this is normal, then we act like it's normal. And we see it in kids. They fall really bad, and they stand up like it's nothing. It's when their parents go like, oh my god, that's when they start crying. When they see how other people react to their fall, that's when they say, oh, something serious just happened. But if you let them fall, they stand back up like nothing happened, and they keep playing. And we lose that. We start pretending that everything is just so much major, and we start adding this narrative to any mistake we make. It is a problem. We need to keep putting our bodies and our mind through stress. Unfortunately, that's how we grow. All growth comes from stress. There's no way around it.
Yep, absolutely. And pressure, right? And that's what um the greatest athletes and the greatest achievers, they've gone through the greatest adversity and
Mhm.
overcame. And so understanding that the more we improve, the more we can overcome. Just like when you start riding the bike, once you get good on the 2 wheels, then you get a bigger bike and you fall and fall and you just get better and better and better. Then you have greater capabilities, and it's each stage you're willing to progress to the next level. And I remember coaching someone, and she's like, I've been really struggling because my other coach was talking about only do what's an FES. You ever hear that? Like the FU, I won't say that word, but it's like the FES life, only do what's
Okay.
an FES. And philosophically and spiritually, reading certain books, maybe that's possible in some sort of enlightenment realm, I don't know. But when I think about a peak performance person and what an Olympic athlete would have to go through and what I've gone through and what I've seen other masters go through, it makes no sense because they're constantly doing stuff they don't want to do, right? Like you go to the gym. It's not like you wake up and you're like, F yes, I'm going to the gym to do this. It's usually like, oh man, I don't really want to do that. And so it's actually overcoming that. But there is also the same thing of like, make the goal the F yes. If that goal and that direction is so inspiring and fulfilling by your own standards, that's what I feel like the integration is to have the, you know, that's going to give you the motivation, the energy, and the will to overcome all the adversities that will indeed happen. And each time you have an adversity, you learn, you grow, and you expand, and it's wonderful.
Exactly. You build resilience. And do you know the story of Felix? I don't know how to pronounce his name. He's the guy that jumped to Earth from the stratosphere.
Yeah, Baumgartner, I think, or something like that.
And he quit at one point in the halfway through the process.
I heard that. Imagine.
Because he was claustrophobic, and he's like, I can't do this. And then they brought a sports psychologist, and he started working through his fear of being in this capsule and just going like one step at a time and everything. So it was very scary. And that's the thing. If you want to achieve great things, you're going to have to put your body through discomfort. And sometimes it's just, you're really scared about what you're trying to do. But as you said, the goal is such a, yes, let's do this, that you go through the how. So I think the quote is from Nietzsche, that if we have a strong enough why, and I'm paraphrasing, we can bear almost any how. So that's the idea. You choose a goal that is like, yes, absolutely. But the how is going to bring some pain and suffering. It's just finding something to suffer for. And I think that Viktor Frankl, the author of A Man's Search for Meaning, he talks about that. Purpose of life is finding something that you're willing to struggle and to suffer for. But there will be suffering. Once we know it, then we take it on and say like, yeah. So as a personal example, throughout the process of writing the book, it was a nightmare. Like many times it was very difficult. One time I was writing at the local Starbucks, and I go to order my coffee, and they say, well, this one's free. Like, why is it free? And they said, well, the manager saw you yesterday and you seem to be really angry and like very, I don't know, just upset about stuff. So we thought that we ruined your coffee. So this one's free. I'm like, it had nothing to do with the coffee. Basically, every day I come here, I open up my laptop and I suffer. That's what I've been doing for the past few months. But I can only imagine what kind of face I was doing just trying to write this thing. And I said, like, I'm not going to do this ever again. And I said to a friend, and my friend, like, once you finish, you're going to start the next one right away because you love suffering. I'm like, no, I don't want this. And then just a couple of weeks later, I realized I never loved hating something so much. And I just developed this love for writing. It's a love-hate relationship. I think we all need some kind of, I don't know, self-inflicted pain. And I don't have vices. I don't do drugs. I don't drink alcohol or anything. So I think I just do that through learning certain things or stuff that I find that is painful. Like writing is painful. It brings back this quote from Hemingway. He used to say, I don't like writing. I like having written. And I feel that way with exercising and with a lot of things that take effort. But once you do them, you feel really good about yourself. It's like, oh, I'm keeping my own promises. And sometimes it's just about that, how you feel about yourself and knowing that you're putting in the work to accomplish what you set out to accomplish.
That's a really great story. And it reminds me of some talk I watched, and it said the reason why you don't have self-confidence is because you keep breaking agreements with yourself. Right. Yeah. And so even if you can start with small ones, right, just start small. You know, in my book, Zen Athlete, you know, for meditation, I just say, start with 1 minute a day. Right. Everyone just says the same excuses. I don't know what to do. I don't know if I'm doing it. Nobody does. That's the thing. Right. So just do 1 minute on the timer. Then the next day, 2, the next day, 3, the next day, 4, just really tiny baby steps. But when you create that agreement with yourself and show up and do it, you build self-confidence. Whether you want to do paint, whether you want to do writing, whether you want to educate yourself, whether you want to read a book you've been waiting to read, put on the timer 10 minutes for the first day. 5, something so small, 5 minutes. And then build the consistency of showing up. And that's going to improve your self-confidence. And you're going to start to build that into a habit. And it's so important. We want to do it all in the one day, right? We're going to have the Saturday
Yeah.
off and we're going to do it all in one chunk. And then we end up doing nothing because it's too overwhelming. And so little tiny chunks is really going to help us propel forward. So it's, everything that you're sharing is really on point. Can you speak a little bit about mastery and the path to mastery? And your last chapter or subchapter is Kaizen. So I'm curious about that,
Yes.
what that means. I know that that's awesome, but explain it to me and talk about mastery.
Sure. I'll take just one step
And
back to
make it
finish up.
easy. I don't want any effort involved. I want mastery to be easy, right? Give me it's funny because I remember when I trained with the Tibetan monks, I wanted to be
Mm,
enlightened, right?
mm,
I've always been looking for the secret, the quote unquote secret, like Kung Fu Panda. That's why I went to China to find the secret of all of this. What's the secret of performance, of mindset? There's no damn secret. That's what I know for sure. I had to spend so much money and so much time, but the secret really is like the process. The secret really is
exactly.
dedication. The secret is overcoming adversity. The secret is just showing up.
Yeah.
You just have to like hear it and accept it. But I'm very stubborn and I refuse to accept it, and I still don't. But there are tools and processes that make
Yes.
performance better and perspectives that allow it to be more expansive and supportive towards the goal. So that works. But you wouldn't even have to read your book or my book or any book on peak performance or sports psychology or mindset if you go, I'm just going to show up and do this. I'm just going to keep showing up no matter what. Cool.
Mhm.
Actually, you don't need to read anything. Go ahead and enjoy. Let us know
Yeah.
how it went, right? You win. You won.
Exactly. This secret has been revealed time and again. We just don't want to believe it.
Yeah, exactly. The secret weight loss, you know what I mean? And even if you did liposuction and you don't change anything, then 6 months later, same
It's
problems,
back.
right? It's
Yeah.
back. So it doesn't exist. It's just, we don't want to hear it. I still don't want to hear it, but so
We
tell me the
refuse
easy
to
one.
accept that's what it takes. It's sometimes, so I studied magic for a while,
Mm.
and sometimes I'll learn these methods of like cardistry and sleight of hand. And so when you see the illusion, it's like, wow, that's amazing. I want to know how to do it. And when you know what it takes to do the damn trick, you're like, I wish this thing were just magic. Because the amount of work it's going to take for me to get to that point. So yeah, we don't want to believe that that's the secret, that is just long-term commitment and doing the work every day. Like, no, it has to be something else, because I refuse to
Yeah.
accept that that's what it takes. And that's when we start jumping from method to method, trying to find like that perfect one. And that's how people get our money. It's like, oh, try my method. You're gonna do it so much quicker. This is gonna be painless, and we want to believe it. We know deep down that that's not gonna happen, but we want to believe it's true because we're not willing to put in the work. But if we spend the time that we spend like jumping from method to method into just one of them, we would be like actually improving in our skills. And then along the way, find ways to optimize it. So this reminds me of people that want to learn to speed read, but they don't read. Like, you're still not going to be reading at the same speed. Okay, first start reading. Tell me that you're reading every day, and now you're frustrated because you want to be able to read more or read faster. Got it. Now let's find a way to optimize that process. But I want you doing it. So it's like, a way to put it is, I don't trust you with a better method if you're not willing to try a less efficient one and commit to that one.
Mm-hmm.
Because then you're not worthy of it. Why? If I give you an easier one, you're still going to quit it, because next week you're going to want an even easier one. So there's no point. For me, if someone told me it's going to take me 10 years to learn Japanese, I would still say yes, because I want to learn it. I know it doesn't take 10 years, but if someone told me that, then you're willing to take it. So the thing is, sometimes when we have all these different offers of learn it quickly, learn it easily, that dilutes purpose, because now we want to take 20 things and we don't give them the value they deserve. But when we realize how much commitment it takes, how much work is behind it, it makes us choose carefully. So like, okay, this really matters to me, and I'm willing to put as much time and energy as it takes to get it done. So when we look at masters from history, for them, it wasn't about how long or how difficult it would be to create their masterpieces. So like Da Vinci or Michelangelo, and a great example is Gilberti. So it took him 30 years to build this baptistry doors. And then he was commissioned another set that took another 30. Like, Really? 30 years on a piece of work. For them, it wasn't about how long is this thing going to take or how difficult it's going to be. It was about realizing their vision. So that's the first part. Like you need to choose that vision, and then ignoring the so-called hacks. So I'm very against learning hacks.
Hmm.
Hacks are usually about achieving some kind of result that you try to portray as mastery of the skill. And the example I'll give is, think of that friend that beats everyone at Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter with a projectile attack or a low kick. Okay, hate them.
It's so
That's a
funny because
hack.
I like know what you're talking about, and there's gonna be just a part of the audience is just getting mad at their buddy for doing that. He's like, son of a.
Exactly, but that's a hack. Yes, you win against your friends, but you haven't mastered the game. Mastering the game is knowing your character, knowing the combos, understanding the game dynamics. Mastering strategy is different. So hacking is about just finding a way, a cheat in the system to get some kind of result that you then pretend that is mastering whatever you're trying to master, but it's superficial. It doesn't have the depth of really learning something. So if you imagine, say you want to write fiction, and then you learn some kind of a formula, and then all you write is in that formula, then what's the point? The idea is that you become part with your craft, with a skill. So they become your life companions. They bring you joy. They bring you happiness. We're trying to build a deeper relationship with what we're pursuing. I'm okay with hacks as long as it's in things that you don't care about. But if it's something that you really value, then you shouldn't be going for hacks. You should be going for the depth, like trying to master every piece of it and
Mhm.
learning all the different details, the intricacies of your craft. That's more rewarding. So I think is first knowing that you're doing it for the right reasons, and then committing to doing that work for however long it takes. And it doesn't matter if you learn slower than others. It goes back to that point, like who cares? So let's say it takes you longer. So what? So let's say a friend of mine will learn Japanese in 6 months and it's going to take me a year. So what? I'm still willing to do it because I want to. I want to learn Japanese. So it's that point. Like you forget about what everyone else is doing as you focus on your own process. Many times we're just obsessed about the best, and we're not willing to take on a skill if we don't have the physical structure or whatever to be the absolute best. It's like, why do it if we could never be at the top of the top? Like, no, what about being among the best? We need to remember that the entire, like Michael Phelps was not the entire swimming Olympic team of the US. There was other great swimmers in that team. Is that not worthy? What about just being your best? Let's say you're already past your prime physically and you could not think of playing professional basketball. You're 5'5" and you're 40 years old. But it doesn't matter, but you could be your best. You can develop the skill and even master the skill. Mastering the skill of basketball has nothing to do with height, has nothing to do with age, dribbling, passes, all these different things. They're independent. So why is not that a noble goal to pursue? Just being your best. That doesn't require genes. That doesn't require luck. It just requires hard work. A lot of hard work.
Yeah, yeah. Everything you just shared there is absolutely brilliant and on point, and it reminds me of the idea that you just be cheating yourself. Like, let's say you go and you run like 10 miles. Like when you're done that first 10 miles or your 5 miles, you build your character, right? If you like art and you want to start doing art, you build your character each time you show up, and it's your expression or your business or whatever, or your ability to be a good parent or anything, right? It's your
Mhm.
expression. If you want the easy way, it circumvents the learning. Now, there are effective tools and processes, but the thing is, like,
Exactly.
how many times I get the idea, like, what's the best way to meditate? What's the best way to lose weight? What's the best way for, like consciousness hacks? What's the right?
Mhm.
And because I do all the I like that's been my um process is do everything. I just do it all. And what I've realized is no one thing is the ultimate way, but just experiment with some ways. But it's in the experimentation you get the learning and value. and you have to go through it. And how you feel when you overcome something, when you sit and write and hate your computer and, go through that process, but show up because the goal is meaningful. When you go to the gym, even though you don't want to, when you make a better choice, it's if you get the easy way, you don't get any of the learning and you end up cheating yourself. And it really is about the process. And, I was thinking about the comparison, how many people don't try anything because they just compare. It's supposed to be fast and easy. It's like,
Mm.
it will take as long as it takes. It's a much
Yes.
more empowering person. It will take as long as it takes for me. I don't need to be the fastest or the best. I'm going to start a process and put my intention there and allow it to unfold without attachments. And then we're kind of getting into some Zen philosophy, which I think is really, really important.
Mm-hmm.
And even in your mastery outline, you talk about one day at a time, do the work,
Mm-hmm.
process over outcomes, make progress the main goal. And I was wondering if you could talk about taking risks, overcoming success, those two ideas specifically.
Sure. I'll get to that point in a sec. I wanted to add something to what you said.
Yeah, sure.
So many times people look for efficiency with the wrong mindset. And this is something that I saw researching the masters is people are looking for efficiency as a way to do less and still
Mm-hmm.
get results. What the
Mm-hmm.
masters try to do is keep the effort steady, but optimize so they can maximize the results. Now, there's a subtle difference there. So if we put this in fitness perspective, let's say you find a way to work out half the time and still get the same results. So people want that, less effort. But then a bodybuilder would say, wow, I found a way to optimize the process. I'm going to keep working out for the same amount of time I'm working, but now my results are going to be exponential.
Mm.
So that's the difference. Instead of looking for ways to optimize the process so you do less, is ways to optimize the process so you get more. So part of my philosophy and what I'm presenting in the book is like, here's how you optimize the learning process so you can get more out of it. Not so you put less effort, so you improve faster, so you get better, so you achieve more instead of let's do less. So that's the point that I wanted to bring across. Now about the taking risks, and which is the other one that you wanted to talk about?
Overcome success, and we'll finish with the Kaizen because I'm curious about
Oh,
that.
right. Yes. I jumped the Kaizen. I'm coming back to it. Well, overcoming success is this idea that once we achieve some success, we're going to have new challenges. So when we're starting out and improving our skills, we have challenges like the plateaus, impatience, um, failures, mistakes. But then with success, we also get some challenges, which is overconfidence. Um, is when we start thinking that we're too good. We no longer need to train as hard. This happens a lot to martial artists, like they become the champions, and it's different what it takes for you to become a champion than it is be to stay a champion. Because now you're at the top, and you're not trying to fight someone above you. You're trying to fight the ones that are coming for you. But the motivation is different, and sometimes it's harder to just stay champion than become champion. So overconfidence is one that starts hitting people. It's like, oh, I'm already the champion. I don't really need to work that hard. I don't need to train that hard. I'm with everyone around you telling you how great you are. Then you start believing the myth. And then the next thing that happens, you get knocked out because the guy that was challenging you, he was putting in the work. So yes, overconfidence. The other one is ego. This is kind of around the same idea. We start thinking we're too great. We're above the work. And in reality, we have to renew our effort every single day. So we need to let our successes expire. We need to take every new project as this is a new thing and I need to prepare just as well. So I like the example of Michael Schumacher, who many times he had the world title secured, like halfway through the season and like way before the end of the season, and he'll still be racing just as quickly, which is so much intention to win that like it didn't matter to him. Is I need to prove myself every single day and every single race. So that's for ego. And then the last one is just fear. When you become good at something, let's say you have some success as a musician and then your album is well received, now is the fear of, can I replicate this? Am I still good enough? Can I outdo what I just did? So then, and with that fear comes a big problem with, which is you try to imitate yourself. You try
Mm.
to do what you did before instead of trying to push to greater heights. So that's the overcoming success. And the last one, the Kaizen. So Kaizen is the Japanese word for improvement, but it's also this philosophy of never-ending search for betterment.
Mm.
So it became kind of a personal philosophy that expanded around the world. And the idea is that we never look at ourselves as being too good for something. So even if we're a master at something, we should never consider ourselves as the master, always an apprentice, an
Mm.
apprentice. All masters know that there's more to do, more to learn. So they remain devoted students of their craft and of themselves. So the idea of we should always be striving for more and knowing that we're never going to reach perfection, but we're going to strive for as long as we can. That's Kaizen, the never-ending search for improvement. So we want to see it in it's kind of a dark way to put it, but I like seeing it that way. So if you're seeing like this long path, so mastery is this path that never ends. We just drop dead somewhere along the way.
It's dark. Well, the way I was thinking about it is like an Instagram notifications of all the 20 somethings that have figured life out so far. You know what I mean? It's just like a Kaizen boop in the face. You know what I mean? It's just like we need a little bit of humble pie out there in the world right now, for some of the people. But I love that
Yes.
principle, and I feel like one of the benefits that I've had in my life, the luxuries I've had is martial arts, is what
Mhm.
it taught me about some of these principles, about the respect of teachers, about
Yes.
learning, about failure, about respecting your classmates, you know, the idea of always learning. And these are simple concepts, but when you get out in the world, it's scary. And we get into this ego of needing to be good at everything, right? And we
Mhm.
just basically pretend we're good at everything and everything's sorted out. And we've kind of lacked this humility of ourselves. And we're like, we can't let people know that we're not good, that we failed, right?
Yes.
I remember once, like 3 years ago, maybe, I was doing the podcast, and uh, I had some momentum going, and something didn't work out, and I had to borrow money from my parents. It was like $1,000, and I think I was like 30, and I just cried. It was awful, and I was like, "How am I this old and I am still failing?" You know what I mean? I was like, it was really rough, and I talked to my mom, who I'm
Mhm.
grateful to have. I don't think I would have achieved anything I have without her, and I just talked to her, and she's like, "You've never given up." You know what I mean? You never, ever, ever give up. And
Mhm.
so it was hard. You know what I mean? It's rough, and it sucks. It sucks to just keep failing and like try and do something, but
Yes.
understanding that it is a process. And like what I like to say is, if it's meaningful and you don't give up, it's inevitable. It's
Mhm.
going to be inevitable, right? And if
Yes.
and if you're fulfilled with your process, if you're each and every day looking at it and being like, I'm creating my life on purpose. On purpose is scary. Default is easy. I did a video on this today. Default is like whatever the universe is going to throw at you, whatever your society. You don't really have to question too much. You show up, you get a paycheck. You don't rustle the feathers. That's nice and easy. It's comfortable in there, right? You
Mhm.
know what you're going to get. But to be deliberate, who do I want to be around? What types of people? How do I want to contribute? What am I made of? What do I want to do? You know what I mean? I want to snowboard off mountains and train with crazy people and do all that kind of stuff. And
Uh,
and there's other things that I desire to do. And you match it with the contentment. I think this is where the Zen philosophy is really helpful. To be content with who you are, with what you know, with what you have, with your skills and abilities as they are, just however you are. It's like, when you're 6 years old, my daughter, when she gets 6 or whatever, it's like, oh, you don't know how to ride a bike, you're not good enough. Then you go
mm.
into, high school. Oh, when I'm in high school and I can kind of have my own autonomy, then I'm good enough. And then they go right out of high school into college and university. Oh, when you have your major and you graduate, then you're good enough, right? But then you automatically become this adult and you're supposed to have something figured out at 24 and you don't. But then even at 34, I'm a bit older than that, 36, but you still don't have anything really figured out. And that's why
Yeah.
these masters and these ancient traditions, that'd be like 60, 70 years mastering something, they only know a bit of a bit. And that's what Socrates said, to know,
Mhm.
what is it? I know that I know nothing, right? And just a bit of a bit. And when we can understand that, we can be more forgiving on ourselves to just be students. It's the idea, like Kaizen, to be a student, to be a
Mm.
willing and open student. And that's, what you need to be in martial arts is always be a student. Even if you're a teacher, you're still a student. You're still always learning. You're still always evolving. And it's a much more empowering mindset, because on the flip side, you have to be the master, and you're creating a facade, because nobody is like knows everything. You know something,
Hmm.
right? But you also know that you had to earn what you know, and there is more to grow. And so you're humble, but you're also confident in your ability to build and grow in a direction that is inspiring to you. And you're willing. You say, you know what, I can do this. I've put in this effort and I built this. Now I can take that same philosophy and I can do this and I can do
Yes.
that. And that's where true empowerment is.
Exactly. I loved your story about in the podcast, and thanks so much for for sharing that. And and this is an important point, and it's a little bit outside of learning, but you you went through a dark place, and what's important is that a lot of good came from that. So we tend to label all these emotions as something negative, but in reality, every invention and a lot of the progress that we have came from those so-called negative emotions, or people being in discomfort of saying like, well, I hate candlelight and how come the world doesn't have this thing. And then there was this deep frustration of creating something else. And many times when I've been at my darkest, that's when after it's like, okay, what am I going to do? And now you have like this new purpose, and you get this second wave of energy, but it comes from being dissatisfied and from sometimes falling. So there is a lot to gain from those emotions as well. We've just been conditioned to avoid them and to think that they're negative. They're just part of it. All emotions are there for a reason. If you feel bad about yourself, it's telling you you need to change something. You need to improve. So when you fight and then you get defeated and you feel horrible, it's like you got to train harder. All these are lessons. So yes, it's really important that we reframe the way we're thinking about our dark points and or difficulties, because they can propel us to the greater stuff if we use them the right way.
Yep. Absolutely agree. Man, this has been a treat. I loved all this, incredibly practical. I definitely invite people to check out your book. When you go check out his book, and if you were to buy the book, which I suggest doing, because I know good books when I see them, and I'm going to get one for myself, um, leave a review because they're freaking helpful. So leave a
Oh,
review, unless
awesome.
it
Thank you.
sucks. If you think it sucks, don't be an a-hole and leave a bad review. Just, you know what I mean? Just keep it to yourself. And the guy did his best effort. I think, the other thing that I think is crappy in our culture is that we've got this culture of people just being total D-bags everywhere. And that's why people are so afraid to create, right? So everybody's
Yes.
so quick to throw a tomato. It's just a culture of crab in the bucket. And now, you know, we have this culture of fear. And if you're not afraid, then you're all of a sudden the enemy. I was like, nah, it's, being, uh, having courage and not having fear is like a bad thing.
Hmm.
No, you can still, like, if you go to war, right? The people who are afraid, they're going to all die, right? You need people to have courage. You understand there's a danger, but you have the skill, capability, and capacity to handle that adversity. That's what we're all capable of. And so what happens is we have this culture of throwing tomatoes of anybody that steps outside of that norm to try to bring them back in, because it makes the average person feel uncomfortable, right?
Yes.
They see someone else do it and they recognize that they have that ability too. And so it's much easier to be, a butt, so if we could be more supportive, when people fall, not throw tomatoes at them, but say, hey, that's a great effort. You know what I mean? Like, here's some feedback that might help you, go do it again.
Yes.
The failures and the attempts, they should be celebrated. As a culture, we should be supporting other humans' efforts, all of us. And so be a
I agree.
supportive person, you know what I mean? Help other people, be collaborative, but culturally it's super disappointing. Humans, they really disappoint me sometimes, I'm not even talking about the evil ones. I'm just talking about your everyday Joes just being
Yeah.
like, be nicer to each other, be more encouraging. And you would like, it's amazing to have a daughter and see it's changed my perspective a lot, but you see how kids are encouraging other kids. Why is it when we become adults, we don't do that?
Hmm.
Why is it? Because we become a certain age, we become buttholes. And, I think it's because we become competitive, right? And there's not enough. We have this lack mentality, right? And so,
Yeah.
if we can just consider being kinder to each other, I think. You want to chime into that? I'm just kind
Yeah.
of repeating the same thing.
Yeah. I think a big part of that is that when we see someone doing something, and let's say it's a good effort, see a good writer puts out a book or something, then we feel worse about ourselves, and because we're not doing the work, and then it's easier to just trash someone else's work, and it makes us feel better about ourselves, saying, "Well, no, that was horrible," because you're not doing it. So we feel threatened when someone else is doing a good thing, and I'll admit I've been guilty of that. Sometimes of seeing something really good and just like, damn, I wish it wasn't that good. I wish that person wasn't getting so much praise, because yes, it makes me feel bad about myself, because I know I could have done the same. Like, I could have put in the work and also do my own art or my music or whatever. So let's say a friend that did really well in music, and I was in music too. And then that person is doing really well. I'm thinking, oh damn, but then, but it's because I could have done it too, and I just stopped. But then that person stuck with it. So sometimes it's just we feel worse, and then that's what makes us criticize. Then Michelangelo, this is this great quote from him. He says, "Instead of criticize, create." Or if
Mm,
you're gonna criticize, create. So if you have
mm,
something bad to say, let's say you read a book and you say this is horrible, then you make your own and make it better, and then there's gonna be space for that. But I think me going into different fields of creativity, when you create anything, and in this case, for example, the book, then there's so much respect for anyone that has put out something, because you've gone through the process, and you know the pains, you know the fears, just put it out there for the world to judge. Then it just gives you this empathy of, even if I read a book and I wouldn't like it, I wouldn't be leaving a horrible review. Like, if I had something to say constructive, I'll try to reach that person individually instead of trying to do it publicly. It's like, hey, you could improve it this and this way, and this is what I think. Um, but man, like, knowing the amount of work and so much of your heart that goes out, it would feel hypocritical to just criticize someone openly and in a mean way after you've done any creative work. So in that sense, I don't know if it's something that I'm imagining, but I would say that anyone that is really mean online to anyone creating something is because they never tried to create something themselves. If they knew how hard it is, it will be humbling. And they'll be like, oh shit, that person deserves some respect just for doing the effort.
mhm.
Because that's what it is. Sometimes it's just the effort. You're like, wow, well done. It's not the greatest of the products, but you put in that effort, just putting out a book or putting out a podcast or just anything, putting out an album. Wow, respect.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I think that, culture would be nice to celebrate each other, celebrate
Mm,
our efforts, to encourage each other. And so many people that I work with, and interestingly, the better they are at writing, the more that they're actually naturally gifted at the thing, the more fear they have to put it out because their identity is now attached to it, right?
mm,
If you completely suck at something, then you're kind of fine because you don't identify with being good at it. You just go participate, and we should be okay to participate and suck, okay to participate and be average, okay to just participate and share what we want to share. And just like if you think of kids, like when they write a story, you don't piss on it because it's not perfect, and we all have different levels, but creation through positive intention should be celebrated. And what I think this fear is creating is people creating out of fear through ego. So it's like it's not their best effort. It's kind of masked in these different ways. It's not authentic, right? And so then it has
mm,
to be sold and massaged. And so there's all this lack of authenticity and congruence. And just be yourself. That's good enough. Have that real intention and put it out there. And when you see that, yeah, like be supportive of what you notice. If you notice one of
yes,
your friends going for it, help them. If you notice them losing weight, help them. If
hundred
support them.
percent.
If you notice they want to write a
Yes,
book and you look and Nick is writing his book and you're like, I suck at writing. Like, bro, good for you. Keep writing it. You got it, buddy. You know what I mean?
yes.
It,
Keep
it'd be
going, and you'll get
yeah,
better.
keep going. You know what I mean? You got it. And it would be so supportive and helpful. And not a lot of people do that. And so hopefully people
Yes,
can think about that too, as they see that, look for ways to encourage and support
for
and
sure.
and be awesome.
One idea to keep in mind, and I wanted to share that as well. So I talk in the book about a concept of bestism. So
Mm,
we know the idea of perfectionism, so trying to be perfect, which is a trap. We can never be perfect or make our work perfect, and usually is a trap that is caused by fear. So we start procrastinating because no, it needs to be perfect. It needs to be perfect. Never be perfect. But there's the other side, which is a line that it has become very popular of done is better than perfect. And so, yeah, perfectionism is a trap. But then also just rushing to the finish line because you're not willing to put in the work, that's just mediocre. So the point that we're trying to get to is bestism, doing our best effort, even if it's far from perfect. So just try to do your best and get there. There's this example where I took this section of the book and I could not get it right. And I rewrote it at least 30 times. And at one point I stopped and I said, my skills as a writer cannot make this section better. Here's where I stop and get to move on. That was my best. Way far from perfect, but I knew I gave it my best. And that's what anyone can ever do. So you do your best. It doesn't matter if you fall short, but it is your best. And then you get that feeling of, wow, I gave it all. And this is it. There's always satisfaction, as you were saying before, that people regret not going all out. So that's it. And the last story that I wanted to share, this is from Jiro Ono. He's recognized as the best sushi chef in the world, Japanese old man. And he was saying that after 50 years working at sushi, I haven't mastered sushi yet. Every day I'm trying to learn and get better. And what impressed me the most, I was watching his documentary, it's called Jiro Dreams of Sushi. He's explaining how at age 80 or whatever it was, he started wearing gloves. And I'm like, oh, that makes sense because, I mean, it's like the vinegar and the sushi, like, probably messing with his hands. And then he explains, no, I started wearing gloves for everything else except making sushi because I want my hands, my tact perfectly to understand if the rice is at the right point with the right amount of vinegar and the fish is the freshness. I'm like, my God. So he wears gloves all day except when he gets to make sushi. That's mastery. Okay. That's commitment to your craft. That's the point we should aspire to get to.
That's amazing. Wow. Dude, well, this has been a pleasure. I appreciate, your work and being able to write the book and putting it out there, and everything you shared is on point. You know what I mean? It's 100% on point and incredibly helpful. Where can people find more about you if they want to pick up the book and where you put out content?
Sure. So the easiest way would be my website is unlimitedmastery.com. So in there, you're going to find the links to the book and to my social media, all the other places. So unlimitedmastery.com or on Amazon and any place where they sell books. Learn, Improve, Mastery is the name of the book.
Awesome.
Thank you
Thanks,
so much
man.
for having me, man.
Yeah, dude,
Had a
this has
great
been
time.
great. Thank guys for watching. We'll catch you in the next episode.
Thanks again.
Yeah, peace.